latest from the Supreme Court, where they have decided to hear the case regarding President Trump's executive order on immigration. This is about who can come in from what countries, a 90-day moratorium. You had the Fourth Circuit, you had the Ninth Circuit, both issuing injunctions. You had these district court judges both calling this unacceptable, and yet you have the Supreme Court saying, yes, they will take the case. Joining us now is William Jacobson, the brains behind legalinsurrection.com, professor at Cornell Law. And you have written already about this in depth at your site, legalinsurrection.com. I'd like to start with just a bit of a baseline, make sure we're all on the same page here. The injunctions from the 4th and the 9th. One basically said that because of what the president said prior as a candidate, he was unable to put forth an executive order that would stop people from coming in from certain countries. The Ninth Circuit said that he overstepped his authority on in putting forward this executive order, and that's why it was also not allowed. Now that the Supreme Court has decided to act, what is it that they're actually acting upon?
Well, what the Supreme Court said is that the order, they're going to accept the cases, they're going to hear both cases, but until that happens in October, the travel order, and I call it a travel order, not a travel ban, the travel order at issue can come back into effect with the exception that you cannot summarily keep out of the country people who already have they use the term bona fide connection to the U.S. So that essentially achieves most of what Trump set out to do originally, which is that people who have no connection to the U.S., the analogy I like to use is the guy sitting on a mountain in Yemen, has no connection to the U.S., never been here, doesn't have a student admission to a university, any of that stuff, cannot come into the country for 90 days. There are people who have a bona fide connection, and what that's going to be fleshed out in the next 90 days remains to be seen. But I think clearly it would encompass somebody who has family here and is seeking just to come here to reunite with family. Doesn't mean they have to be admitted, but they have to be accorded some process to go through. A student who is enrolled in a university in the U.S. from one of those 6 countries.
And we saw that, Dan McLaughlin had pointed this out on Twitter, that you cannot be an organization that helps people get into the country and then put people on a list and then claim hardship when they can't get into the country, as if the Supreme Court saw that people might try an end around of the Supreme Court and the lifting of these injunctions as a way to try and get more people into the country, even though they're saying that the president is entitled to what he calls, and I know that you don't call it a travel ban, but the president did, so that's the term I use. It's very interesting that the Supreme Court made sure in their own writing to make sure that people didn't try and do an end around of the system.
Right, and that's, I think, the normal meaning of the word bona fide, which means a good faith, a legitimate, a true connection to the U.S., as opposed to, you're right, the ACLU now announcing anybody who wants to be an intern in its New York office can come here, and then all these people claim they have a connection to the U.S. So, and I'm obviously the ACLU hasn't said that. I'm saying hypothetically if they were to do that. Yes, but how that works out in any particular case, I suspect, as the dissenters point out, this could result in a lot more litigation. The dissenters, which was Justice Thomas, Alito, and Gorsuch, said, wait a second, this travel order should be reinstated in its entirety.
And that is kind of amazing. Talking to William Jacobson of Legal Insurrection, it was the opinion, which was unsigned, was written by, I believe it was Chief Justice John Roberts. But as you point out on your site, legalinsurrection.com, there are 3 justices already, Alito, Gorsuch, and Justice Clarence Thomas, who, as you just said, they don't even know why we have to go through the charade. The whole thing should be allowed in place in full. What is their difference from Justice Roberts?
Well, it was a per curiam, so I don't recall if it indicates who actually wrote it. Per curiam means it's not issued in any one judge's name. It's the consensus of the court.
You'll forgive me if I got that wrong. I saw a lot of things, and I thought that was Justice Roberts. I can, of course, be wrong on that one. I'll go with your expertise on that.
But that's important because the per curiam order means 9 justices agreed on this. Okay, nobody said the Fourth and Ninth Circuit injunctions should continue in full force and effect. Not a single justice said that. The only question was how much of a slapdown they were going to give to the Fourth and Ninth Circuits, and I think they gave a substantial one. It is entirely possible that there could be 2 more votes to reinstate the whole thing come October.
So you're saying that
until October.
For those of us who aren't experts in the Supreme Court, aren't experts in the Latin, the way this comes down, you're saying that there was no opposition to allowing this to be heard by the full court and by rescinding the majority of the injunctions against the travel ban. This was a 9-0 decision to say, okay, we'll hear it, and what the president wants goes mostly in effect.
Correct. And that's why if the White House, like a minute before I got on the phone with you, Sean Spicer tweeted out the White House statement on this and said that they are applauding the unanimous decision of the Supreme Court. That's what people need to understand. This, all the progressives out there who are popping champagne corks and all that sort of stuff with these lower court decisions, they got slapped down by all 9 justices, including Ruth Bader Ginsburg, the leading liberal on the court, at least to a substantial part of the lower court orders. So that's what I think the media is not really reporting here. Whenever something good happens for Republicans or Trump, I like to watch CNN and MSNBC to see how they react. And they were both playing this as, oh, well, the court only partially reinstated, blah, blah, blah. So they were trying to downplay it. In fact, 9 justices agreed that what the lower courts did was improper. The only disagreement was how improper it was. Yeah, and that's
the president has come out with a statement. The White House out with a statement. I'll have that for you in just a few minutes. William Jacobson joins us, legalinsurrection.com. Cornell law professor. Let me give you what I think is foreshadowing, sir. You tell me. You're the expert. I'm just a guy with a microphone. They wrote that an American individual or entity that has a bona fide relationship with a particular person seeking to enter the country as a refugee can legitimately claim concrete hardship if that person is excluded. As to these individuals and entities, they wrote, we do not disturb the injunction. But when it comes to refugees who lack any such connection to the United States, for the reasons we have set out, the balance tips in favor of the government's compelling need to provide for the nation's security. In light of the fact that we know that 9-0, as you discussed it, and as the White House statement has discussed it, they voted to allow this to go forward with certain levels of exception. Could I take that statement for the reasons we have set out, the balance tips in favor of the government's compelling need to provide for the nation's security? Can I take that as foreshadowing of how the court feels on this subject?
You can't take it like cause and effect, but I think what we can say is that there are 3 justices who are solidly in favor of reinstating the travel order, which are the dissenters, and that there probably is a majority of the court who is going to continue at least with this ruling, because while this isn't a ruling on the merits, it's on what they call a stay application to put a hold on the lower court injunctions. The standard for doing that is pretty high. You have to show that there's a substantial likelihood that the person seeking the stay, meaning Donald Trump, is going to prevail. And so this is a preliminary vote. And believe me, these justices, they've basically researched this thing to death by this point in time. Okay, this was a 16-page decision. You normally don't get a 16-page decision on a stay application. You get like a 1-paragraph decision. So they've already researched this. They know what the issues are. They've probably been following these cases for months as they've worked their way, knowing they're going to land on their doorstep. So the likelihood that somebody's going to substantially change his or her mind between now and October on what's already been decided, I think is very small. I think it's entirely possible there could be a 5-4 split, with Kennedy, if assuming he doesn't retire, being the swing vote, as to whether the court goes farther than it has now. But I think while nothing's a certainty, it's highly unlikely you're going to get a decision in October which says, you know what, the Fourth Circuit and the Ninth Circuit were right after all. I just don't think that's likely.
I don't think so. I'm going with my foreshadowing. Dang it, I'm sticking with it. By the way, on Justice Kennedy, you think he's going to announce a retirement today or this week?
I have no idea. Let me get out a coin and I'll flip it for you. I don't know. I mean, he's been there 30 years. He's 81 years old. On the other hand, you know, sometimes these justices, they don't want to give it up. I mean, this is what their life is. They obviously enjoy it. I mean, it's stressful, but no indication he's incapable of going forward. I think that, you know, maybe he just didn't want to break Twitter by announcing it today on top of all these things. Because if he does announce his retirement and there is a pick to replace him, that is going to be another real political brawl. Of course, the Republicans can get who they want because they have the votes and they remove the filibuster. But just remember, Gorsuch was one of the three dissenters who wanted to vacate those orders completely, the injunctions, and reinstate the whole thing immediately. So he has truly assumed the Scalia seat on the court. I mean, he is the one, you know, he is a solid vote. So we're back to three solid conservatives. Who knows what John Roberts is going to do in any given case? Literally, I mean, he does, I think, for the most part. And so we're back to where we were before Scalia, unfortunately, died early. And, you know, but if we get a fourth, if we replace Kennedy, that now will make Roberts the swing vote. I don't know if that's better or worse, but that's where we would be.
It's a start. William Jacobson, legalinsurrection.com, Cornell Law Professor. I appreciate you. I'm Tony Katz.